Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Woodman, and I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to talk about the Supreme Court case of Dred Scott v. Sandford in terms of how they viewed citizenship for African Americans at the time when slavery occurred. This is important because this was a major instance in having a government branch make a stance on citizenship during a dispute. Before we get into this case, let's talk more about birthright citizenship. As I talked about in the previous video, birthright citizenship is obtained when you are born in a country. In 1898, in the case of the United States v. Wong Kim Ark, the Supreme Court ruled that the 14th Amendment guaranteed citizenship to anyone born in the United States, even if his or her parents were not citizens or were undocumented aliens. We will talk more about this specific Supreme Court case later in this video set series. But before this Supreme Court case and the 14th Amendment happened, the Constitution said nothing about citizenship. Slaves could not be citizens, nor could, quote, Indians not tax, unquote, but every other American who wanted to be a citizen seemed to be one. But most citizens were not allowed to vote. You had to be a white male and own property, or in some states, pay taxes. George Washington was elected president in 1789 with only 43,000 votes, less than 2% of the population of the United States. Property owners would cast votes in the best interests of the nation and not be swayed by pressure. However, this was supposed to be a democracy for people to make decisions. Back then, the Founding Fathers wanted qualified people to make decisions. Otherwise, they believed there would be chaos. Congressman James Madison, also known as the father of the Constitution, said, quote, "The United States needed people, a lot of people, to help the country expand, bring in revenue, and provide means of self-defense. So the question of who could become a citizen was taken up in 1790 by the first Congress. Everyone wanted to encourage immigrants, but when we are considering the advantages that may result from an easy mode of naturalization, we ought also to consider the caution necessary to guard against abuses. I do not wish that any man should acquire that privilege, but who, in fact, is a real addition to the wealth or strength of the United States," unquote. Essentially, they had to be the right sort of immigrant. They ended up offering citizenship only to any free white person of good character who lived in the United States for 2 years straight and in a specific state for 1 year. Still, not everyone was pleased. Senator William McClay said, quote, "The truth of the matter is that it is a vile bill, illiberal, void of philanthropy, and needed mending much. We Pennsylvanians act as if we believe that God made of one blood all families of the earth," unquote. McClay's mending never happened. A series of new laws changed the residency requirement, ending at 5 years, where it remains today, but the other main provisions remained unchanged. Now, why do I bring all of this up? This is to lay some basic foundation for how vague and limited citizenship requirements were to people in the United States in its early years. At the time, the Constitution did not say who can and cannot be a U.S. citizen. The country essentially relied on what the framers thought citizenship should belong to based on their actions and who they felt deserved to have the powers of citizenship. The framers had a limited viewpoint on having citizenship belong to one set of the population, which was white male property owners. The framers also believed if citizenship were to be extended to anyone, especially for immigrants, it had to be the right person to them. These framers' intention would play out in the Dred Scott v. Sandford case, Supreme Court case. Let's look at this. President Andrew Jackson met with his former Treasury Secretary and former Attorney General Roger Brooke Tanley. They wanted the rights of the states to be protected, especially the slave states. In Fort Snelling, Wisconsin Territory, 1836, Harriet Robinson and Dred Scott got married. Both Dred and Harriet were born slaves, but when their owners took them north to where slavery was forbidden by the Missouri Compromise of 1820, they became free, at least where they were, in a free territory. The Missouri Compromise was a law that tried to maintain the balance of slave states and free states in Congress. Maine was admitted as a free state and Missouri as a slave state. The law also stated that, except for Missouri, slavery would be prohibited north of the 36 degree 30 parallel. Northerners insisted that meant that any slave traveling from a slave state to a free state would automatically be freed. Southerners disagreed. Slaves were considered property to them. That would be the same as saying if a Northerner came south with cattle, the cattle would be freed. But Dred and Harriet's owner must have agreed they were free, since marriages were only recognized between free people. If they were still slaves, the ceremony would not have taken place. But would they be free if they went back to the South? When they returned to a slave state, their owners insisted they were slaves once more. The Scots first tried to buy their freedom, but then sued their supposed owner, John Sandford, to get it. The court ruled against Dred and Harriet Scott. Scott appealed to the state court, appealed the state court decision in federal court, where he lost once more. Scott's anti-slavery lawyers appealed to the Supreme Court. They had in their hands the power to settle the slave question once and for all, and perhaps prevent a war. However, Justice Tanley thought the South would not accept the North as a haven for every freed or runaway slave who could make it across a state line. He thought the Constitution recognized slaves as property and pledged the federal government to protect it, but Taney was not content simply to return Scott to slavery. He added what he thought of black people as a race. He said, quote, "They had for more than a century before been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, and so inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect," unquote. Tanley also ruled that no black person, slave or free, could become a citizen of the United States. That was a big deal. In fact, the Dred Scott decision was considered the worst case in American history for many reasons. Instead of helping to prevent a civil war, it helped to start one because it effectively gave so much power to the slave states. It made relations between the North and South more tense. It denied citizenship and civil rights to black people because they were considered property. In fact, it was like the Supreme Court did not see black people as human beings. They essentially used racism and beliefs on how the framers viewed black people to rule in favor of the slave owner. It showed how a government institution efficiently viewed black people in the 1800s, and it was clear they viewed black people to be inferior to white people. Now, of course, this decision was superseded after the 13th and 14th Amendments were passed to abolish slavery and give citizenship rights to people born or naturalized in the United States. This addressed what the Constitution was missing this whole time, which was a provision that explained how someone can become a citizen. These amendments were passed during the Reconstruction era, which was a time to increase a sense of belonging for black people after the Civil War. We'll talk more about this in the next video, but all of this shows how poor of a job this country did with initially figuring out who belonged in this country. It had to take a deadly civil war to change the way we operated in expanding citizenship rights to black people. At the same time, though, there were still some struggles with citizenship rights for black people during Reconstruction. This will be the next topic for the next video. Until then, please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and turn on the post notifications so you will be notified when I post my next video. I appreciate your support. Remember, you are powerful, you are capable, and you are the change maker our society needs. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you soon.